All right, we're back with some crazy questions. It's COMP125, lesson 11, part 4. You know what? I was going to do a lab today, guys and girls, but I think I'm going to put the lab off till next week. We'll do the lab next week. I think it might be better for us, especially since we're introducing new things. And we'll do the test after that, like quiz after that. Because you know what? I got so many questions here, and I want to make sure you guys are successful. If I do a lab today or talk about the lab today, you're going to have very less time to do the rest of the stuff. I'll put it off. I don't care. But that means that so week 12 is next week. We only have one class. We'll do a lab then, which will be due by Friday. And week 13, we'll do a little quiz to help you for your final, right? You're also going to get assignment number 4 next week. Expect that, please. Assignment 4. Okay, we'll talk about that. Will be your final assignment for the class. Okay, let's go back into to this. So DOM manipulation, we've kind of talked about this as well. And again, for DOM manipulation, notice that there's several methods. One that's the getter if it's empty, and one that's the setter when there's something inside, some kind of value that you're getting from it. Setter, and then getter. We've done this. And here's some examples of that. I'm looking for an element that's an aside. I'm changing the HTML element, the inner HTML. I'm changing it. I'm adding in an H2 tag. That's what this one does, right? This is great. So if I want to inject, stuff, and we've done injection throughout the entire course. We've been doing first of all, I want to make a reference to an element. I want you to take this away. If you can take anything away from this course, in order for me to affect my HTML, I need to make a reference to an element that exists, or make a new element, one of the two, right? Once I make a reference to that element, I can inject stuff, play with it, add additional special effects or whatever, right? Here's an example. I want to replace all elements that have a class name of old with an H2 element. And I can use this new replace with. So I'm using here this element here, which has a class of old. I'm going to replace the whole element with an H2, whatever that element's going to be, right? Would I ever want to do this kind of stuff? Yes. Especially if I want to get very specific. For example, a link. I want to change my link so it's totally different. How do I target something like that? Well, luckily, we have some example of this, right? And let me show you how this works. So if I go, we'll do one example of this. If I look at my partial, you can see that in my nav bar, I have in the IDs for all of my links, right? For example, my projects link, right? So here's my projects link. I'm targeting my ID, which is projects, and I'm going to say, well, instead of having a projects link, let's do a gallery, right? Let's swap my projects link for gallery. How do I do that? So first, let's just copy this whole thing. Follow me here for a second. I'm copying the whole projects link from my nav bar, and I'm going to go back into my app.js, right? Let's get rid of this. Well, actually, we'll leave this little funny effect. Who cares, right? What I want to do is I want to target. First of all, let's paste that in. So this is my code, right? That I want to change, right? I just copy the list item from my nav bar, right? For now, and I want to use this so that we can target it. So I'll say, well, okay, how do I target this thing? The way I'm going to target it is I want to do an ID of projects. So we know what the ID of projects, and it's going to be my list item, right? And I want to do replace with, right? Replace with this one with some new code, right? And I'm going to put it in quotations. So I'm going to take this whole thing out here. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to put it inside here, right? And we have some issues. Why? Because of the quotations in quotations, which means I can make these single quotes, which I recommend to take away the errors. Because you can put quotations in quotations as long as you put single quotes, and double quotes. You can do this too, right? So quotations with a quotation. And will this be wrong, right? Might be the other way around, by the way, too. If it's not this way, it's the other way. So now I have this new code that I'm going to inject, but I don't want to make projects.html, right? I want to do something like gallery.html. Gallery.html does not exist, but we're going to make it gallery.html, right? And instead of projects, we're going to give it a new ID of gallery. So the whole projects list item is going to go away. And my projects is going to turn to gallery. That's the list item. This is something we can do, right? And it's not going to be some kind of this. Let's find a good thing for gallery from Font Awesome. So we'll go into Font Awesome. font, awesome, icons. There we are. If I go icons, and if I want to see something like a gallery, I want to search for some icons, right? And how do I do that? Oh, let's refresh. Of course, you know, we have the icons, but what I want to do is I want to search for icons. And did they take the search around? Huh? They did. They took the search off. Anyway, so let's look at something that's a good thing for a gallery. Now, that's unfortunate. It says the docs are for 3.21, which is no longer officially supported. Check out the latest version of Font Awesome. Okay, good. I don't know. Maybe, oh, that's why. That's why. We looked at the wrong site. Oh, boy. Tom. So what I want is for a 4.6, I want to find some kind of gallery, right? Is there a gallery? How about images? Image. All right, I like that. Picture O. Picture O, we'll use that one for that one. So picture dash O. So that's cool. So I'm going to change this to picture dash O. So outlines is what the O stands for, right? And that's what I want to do. I want to replace anything that has an ID of projects with this list item. Let's see if it works. So save. We're going to go back to here, and we should see gallery, right? If it worked properly. Let's refresh. Hey, what happened? How come my projects didn't turn to gallery? Be cognizant of what this does, right? If I look at my console, right, and here's my projects, I'm looking for an ID of projects, right? Huh? No, this is ID, right? Just like it would be in CSS, right? Well, remember what I'm doing here. Here I'm loading my nav bar, and I'm loading it dynamically, right? My load nav bar is happening in here. Let me show you. So when my load nav bar happens, I have an event that's waiting for my nav bar to load. And when my nav bar loads, then I set the active page. I don't set the active page until my nav bar is loaded, right? So I wouldn't put it where I'm putting it because at this point, there is no project's ID. It doesn't exist, right? Let's try moving this. By the way, we'll put maybe a semicolon would help us too, eh? What do we think of that? Let me take this whole thing here, copy it or cut it. I'm going to go back up to here where it says set active page, right? Under set active page, I'm going to, or before I do that, sorry, I'm going to put in a little bit of code for that up here before. So I've finished loading. When I'm done loading, hit the projects item and then replace it with something else. Let's see if that works. Ah. See? Let me show you that again. Refresh. So now there's no more projects, it's gallery. Right? That's a really cool effect. If you want to, if let's say, for example, only logged in users can see the gallery, or the projects or whatever, or something you want to see, you can replace something with something else. Not really a great thing to do, but if I really want to, I could. You can replace any text, and that's just an example of how to do that. But you have to do it the right place. Because we're using Ajax to load, we have to wait till it's loaded before I can target it. Right? And it works nice, right? And instead of doing gallery, I can do something. I can replace my entire nav bar like that. All right. Are you guys clear about that? Nav bar loads, I target it, replace everything inside with something else. Let's go back. So this is what replace with. The old stuff I replace with something new. Replace all. This targets every element that has a specific way of doing it. All H2 tags, as an example, replace it with something else. Prepend and append. There's some other really cool effects here. But basically, if you understand the way jQuery works, and hopefully by now you should understand the way it functions, you should be able to do any of this stuff that you want to do. The trick is to know that it can be done. Right? Example, I want to add something before. When it says before, that means I want something to be inserted before the selected element. Like for example, I target the element, whatever it is, and then I use before, and I put my new content in there. Example. One example, and then we have to move on really quickly because we have a lot of other things to cover before we're done. Example, my first H1, right? So I've done all this. Remember, I can do chaining, right? So before my H1, if I really want to, right? There's my animation chain. Before my H1, right? I want to put in some other element, some other content. So I can do something like this. I can say, I don't know, another H1 tag. Right? And instead of hello world, we'll say with another H1. Put in goodbye, right? Goodbye, right? Before my H1. And I can put it afterwards too. So let's try it out, see what happens. So I go back to here, and there's goodbye. So if I refresh, you can see now that goodbye is positioned before my H1 got generated. And if I want it to go after, I can just change the word to after. So after my H1, after it's generated, put the goodbye, right? I can put that after, and it'll come stocked in layers, right? This is really useful, for example, if I want to add in additional things. An example would be, well, I've got my gallery, right? But after my contact, I want to put in something else, right? I can do that. So I have my, I can target the last element, right? And I want to add something else after, or I want to add something in before, or I want to have something in between. Between my gallery and my about page, I want something else. I can target my my about me page, and before I want to inject another piece of code, right? This is really neat for DOM manipulation. I think that's what jQuery does really nicely and really easily. I'm not going to talk about this. To give you some examples here about how to do that: insert after, insert before, and how it does that, and how it wraps elements in other elements. Removes empty child nodes, but these are things that you can probably infer on your own. CSS, how we can do that: change the width, or get the width of an element, and then set the width of an element. You can do that with jQuery as well. All this stuff is great. Validation is something we have to talk about, because validation is one of the key reasons why we use jQuery. So we have a lot of things like in a form, like, for example, text boxes, radio buttons, lists, checkboxes, receive data, all kinds of stuff that does that. And we can use data validation to make sure that we get the proper input. Okay, so we can target an element, like, for example, all form elements that have input, select, text area, or button. So first we target it, right? And then once we've targeted the element, whatever it is, then we can do something to it. We can check to see if an element has the proper stuff in there. For example, the handler runs when the focus moves to the selected element. So when the focus shifts away from my, I don't know, first name text box to my last name text box, I can say, hold on, let's run this handler. Did I do my first name text box? Is it the exact way I want? Can I target it with a pattern, like we did before with regular expressions, to check to see if that if it meets the pattern specification we have in a regular expression? Yes. Cool. Move on. Let it do it. No. Go back, and I can make it go shift the focus back to where I want. From a validation perspective. The select event, what it does is it selects everything inside that input box if I want to, so I can replace what I have in there with something else, right? This is important for us to talk about. But a lot of the stuff when it comes to validation, we've already done, but just with JavaScript, right? And I want you to think about doing with jQuery as an easier way to do it. Here's an example of document.ready says, so wait for the page to be ready, and then target on all elements with an ID of join list, right? When I click on these elements, as an example, then make sure that my email form, I hit the submit button on my email form. So when I click on the join list, I submit my email form. Submit actually does the submit functionality of my email form. That's what it does. It follows the submit method. Okay, Ajax. Before, when we were doing Ajax with JavaScript, right, we were using this methodology, XHR, right? We have a couple of XHR objects up here: address book, nav data, and footer data, right? We need to have this variable, and then after we have this variable, we have to use the 4 steps in order for us to use Ajax, right? Remember what those steps are. We create the XHR object. We open a stream, and with a proper URL and the method get or post or whatever you want, right? Okay. And then we have a send request, and finally, after it's done, we have an event listener where we're waiting for the ready state change to complete in order for us to do read the data. We're waiting for something, and then we can do something when it's fully read, right? That's what we do with regular JavaScript. Okay, jQuery, a little bit different. Let's wait what it can do. Well, first of all, the load HTML data. We're waiting. If I want to load HTML data, I just have to use the load event, right? And if I do a get, here's the syntax. Get my URL, as an example. If what's the data that I'm going to get? What do I do upon success? So what do I do when I have a success? And then the data type. And the same thing with a post. Here's the other thing I can do. I can say get JSON. I want to get JSON data with a get request. Get JSON is exactly what we want to do. We want to get JSON from a file, right? And it's going to give you some examples. So what these parameters mean. URL is the string of the URL with the request. So just like we had before, right? My data is a map or a string that is set to the server with the request, usually to filter the data that is returned, all right? What do we do on success? What happens when we're successful or if we're not, right? And a string that specifies the type of data, HTML, XML, JSON, script, or text that we're reading from. That's what this data type is. Notice that when we say get JSON, we assume that the data type is JSON. Okay. Some other examples. Now, you're going to love this. So here's my solution. I want to load this solutions.html. What does this mean? Then instead of me injecting data the way we've been doing it with just regular Ajax, let's go back and change it, right? So here I have my load my navbar. My load my navbar goes here, right? And I use all this stuff to do it with, right? No. We don't want to do that. We want to target something for the load. So I'm going to comment these out because remember when we load our navbar, we do something like this. We say, well, get my document.getElementById main nav, and we're going to load up our navbar inside main nav, right? Let's comment this stuff out for a second so I can show you. So I'm going to comment it out. So I'm commenting this piece out, all this, and I'm commenting the piece that actually reads the nav, this part, let's load navbar. Let's comment that out too. Just for you can see this. I'm going to make another function called load navbar. But my function that says load navbar is going to be a little bit different. So I'm going to say function, right? Load navbar. And my function is going to do something different. I'm going to target with jQuery main nav, right? And I'm going to load from the file, right? If you notice what I'm loading here is partials navbar. This is it. Watch. So I want to have this line here, partials navbar, load, right here. Okay, so this partials navbar is going to load. And just to be fair, because we can't do all this in once, right? Notice on my main nav, inner HTML, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. I want to do this too, right? Just because I did that before. I want to get that gallery page, so it looks almost identical. For now, right, we're going to put that under here. So there's what, 4 lines? 4 lines of stuff we're going to do. Let's go back and see what the effects are on our page. Refresh. So look any different to you? 4 lines as opposed to 10 lines of code. That's the beautiful thing about jQuery, and that's why jQuery really helps us out when it comes to partial page loading, right? I would rather do jQuery for partial page loading than JavaScript any day of the week because it takes 4 lines. Or actually, 1 line. Let's do the same thing so we did this load navbar, that's here. Then we read the address book. We're going to do that in a second. But load footer is the other one. So we'll do the load footer really quickly too. So here's my load footer. We're just going to comment this out. So you can see that the original code is there, right? And we're going to comment this piece out as well, my load footer. Here's my load footer, read footer. Comment this piece out. Oh, one thing we didn't do with our load navbar is set the active page. We're going to have to do that in a second. But we also set the active page here. That's one thing we did not do with our navbar. In fact, if you want to check this out to see that this doesn't do it, if I go back here, notice that there's nothing set here, right, for our active page. But we're going to check this on down here when we made this new load navbar. So we load the active page after we set the navbar to a little bit different. So we'll do this here, save, and you can see now that. Oh, update type error. Cannot read property set attribute of null. Why? Because we're trying to set the attribute of something that doesn't exist. right? Looking at the index page. And this is where we run into problems again. We're loading the nav bar. Yes, we're replacing it with gallery. Notice it didn't replace, right? Why? Because when we do our load event, we have something else, right? When the event completes, upon complete, we need to do something. And this is the great thing. Watch. So function, we can put an anonymous function in here. So when it completes, I want to do these things. When it's completed loading the nav bar, I want to do these two things, right? That's how easy it is to do that. And you can see now that I've got my gallery changed and my home image done, right? Guys, this many lines as opposed to all this grayed out stuff, right? Hold on. We haven't finished the footer bar, right? So the footer bar is load footer. We don't have load footer. We're going to make load footer. So we're going to function really quickly. We're inside this one already. Sorry. Know what the problem is? I've got to just format my code so that way, yeah, that's it. And function, we'll say load footer, which is this one. We'll do the same thing for the footer bar. We'll say, so again, if you notice the footer bar target, what does it target, right? The footer is going to get this piece, but it needs to target something. And if you notice what it's targeting, right? When I read my footer data, I'm targeting footer, right? So I do the same thing. So I'm going to target an ID of footer, right? And I'm going to load, right, from my partials, my footer bar, which is right here. Take a look. I'm using jQuery instead of JavaScript. Can I do it with JavaScript? Yes, I can. Do I need to do it with JavaScript? No, I don't, right? And I'm going to show you as we go on, and here's some extra stuff. This is all the stuff that I want to do. So when my footer's finished loading, I want to do this piece, right? So I know I'm going to do that inside my callback function, right? Which is going to be after I finish loading. So after I finish loading, I'm going to do another function. Upon complete, what am I going to do? I'm going to do this, right? And this, my friends, is equivalent to doing the other stuff. There's my footer back, right? So again, in a couple of lines, right, I have nice, tight little functions that do all of this stuff, right, which we'd have to do. I don't have to wait for ready state. I don't have to think about status. It does all that stuff for me in the background. And it does it the same way every single time anyway, right? Okay, this is cool, but the really cool stuff is how it does, oh, what happened here? The really cool stuff is how it does the get JSON. So get JSON, I target what it is, and then I do something with the data. Okay, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I like it. Right? Let me go back and try this again. Right? So I now, instead of loading my footer and my nav bar, I want to read my address book. Right? This read my address book stuff is the same thing. So I'm going to comment this out. So comment this out, and I'll comment this out. And you know what? Let's comment this out too, because all this read data. By the way, see these? Unnecessary. That's another thing that it does nice, right? So I don't need to do any of that XHR stuff. And I'm sorry to tell you, but this is where jQuery is just easier. So, okay, when I'm done loading, what do I want to do? I want to JSON parse my address. That's still stuff I have to do. I still have to do something with my data, right? So I got to do this, JSON parse, blah, 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 blah. Because remember, if I go back to my PowerPoint, it says, do something with my data. Well, look, I have my data, right? And now all I'm going to do is parse my data, right? So JSON parse, and instead of address book response text, I'm going to parse my data. Data is going to go what's going to go in here, right? But I need this piece still. So by the way, I'm going to replace my for each in a second too. So I'll copy this, and that's what I need, right? So let's go back and make that other thing function, right? So here's my load footer. My read address book is what I want. So I'm going to kind of make that new function. So function, right, as an example, and it's going to be called, oh, sorry, read address book. There we go. And what I want to do here is I want to do the exact same thing. I want to target the element, and then I'm going to do something like, you know, read JSON is what I want, right? So if you notice this, get JSON. Here's my get. So instead of doing this, I want to get JSON. So get JSON. Right, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to target my URL string. So what am I targeting for my JSON? Let's go back here and make sure it's the same one, because I already have it done. Where did I put that? Here. Scripts. address book JSON. There we go. All right. Now, it's slightly different, right? Because I got to be honest, like, it's not exactly the same, but I'm sorry. So I got this piece. There's get JSON. And now after I do that, what do? It says upon success, I can do something with my data, right? It's all right in there. So on success, what do? So I can do a function, anonymous function on success, and I can do what I'm going to do here, which is all this. This part. I know it looks like a little bit the same, but I want you to see how much easier this is. So instead of JSON parsing this stuff, I'm going to parse my data. Because inside my object, inside of this data object, I'm going to get data. You notice the example from the PowerPoint? It does exactly that. So here's my JSON. Okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to get my data from my JSON object, and then I'm going to parse it. Now, is it the exact same? Because remember, I talked about this. Is jQuery exactly the same as JavaScript? No, it's not. Let's see how it changed things. So I save everything. I go here. Here's my hello world. Let me refresh everything. Remember, our JSON data, right, is in our console. It says uncaught syntax error, unexpected token in JSON at position 1. Right? So as it's reading my data, right? Well, one thing to note is before we parse my JSON, I'm getting JSON. Do I have to parse it? That's all I'm saying. Do I have to parse it after I'm getting it, right? Because we'd have to parse it before, but now I just maybe have to do something like this. Remember I told you how it's slightly different? Now let's see if it's there. Okay. I don't even have to parse it because it's already JSON. I know I'm getting JSON. I'm using a getJSON method, which is right here. So this little method does all the work of what we did in two functions. And we did it in 2 seconds. I'm still doing a context for each because context is my address book context, and I'm doing the same thing, right? So if you wanted to use this method, the getJSON method, instead of the JavaScript method for your assignment, number 3, you're welcome to do so. I don't mind doing that because this is why I'm showing you jQuery. jQuery is much simpler when it comes to doing things. It takes care of a lot of our problems. I don't have to worry about ready state. I don't have to worry about, anything else like that. I just have to get the data and use it. And that's why most popular libraries out there use jQuery, right? Because some successful functions that are pre-built for you, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And when we use JavaScript to do Ajax, we reinvent the wheel. We kind of start coding from scratch. Is it useful to do that sometimes? Absolutely. It's really useful to know how to do it because when we use Node.js and other kind of back-end JavaScript libraries, it's good to know how to do all that stuff. But for the most part, jQuery. Here's a great example of where we want to load different parts of our page, right, inside of a function that loads different things. Different parts of our page can load in that. I'm not going to go through this, but this is exactly what we've done, right? And I'm showing you examples here in the PowerPoint of how to do that. Here's the same way to do XML. If you're really careful, I put this page in here as well for you. So let's say, for example, your boss says, hey, Tom, I want you to load XML. I don't want you to use JSON. We don't use JSON at the company. We use XML. Same way, same how to do it. So I use the get method instead of the getJSON method because the get is a generic get, right? It gets whatever you want. And then it says, where's my XML, right? And then here's the callback function. So when I get my data, I can do something, and I have to parse through my data because XML it looks like HTML. It's a markup language, and I have to parse through my data to find different pieces of it and then do something with it. So XML, that's why XML is not the preferred way to read data anymore because it's more complex, right? It's much easier to do JSON than XML. And this is the JSON data example. Much easier, right? It's JSON data I read, and I can append, as an example to this, the values that I get from the data that I read from with a for each statement. Hey, for each. So I want to do for each of the pieces of data that I get, I want to do something, right? Remember that the for each statement, what the method says, it processes each item, right, in the collection. for each item in the collection. How do I use the for each? Because I got to leave you with this one. How do I change this context dot for each to a dot each, right? So if I go each for each item, if I open it up, it tells you how to do it. It says, what's the collection, right? So what's the collection that I'm targeting, right? So in this particular case, the collection is contacts, right? For each contacts, right? Here's the callback function to do something. Here's my function, same way I did before. And what I want to say is, for each function or contact, can I do the same thing? Can I process the for each statement in the exact same way, right? And I'm just going to comment this out so you can see it. Is it simpler in this case? I'm not sure that I would trade my contacts for each for my jQuery for each, right? I'm not sure that I would do that in this case because it's so short, and actually it gives me different data too, right? It's not what I wanted. But what it did go through is it did iterate. It did iterate through my contacts, right? My contacts went 1, 2, 3, but I didn't get what I wanted, right? Because my parameter that I passed in, contact, doesn't make any sense. Contact is the contact that I'm getting, right? So what I'm really doing is 0, 1, 2, 3 is I have to do something like this. My contact would be more complex. It would say contacts, which is not what I like, contacts. This is the thing that, this is my counter, if you will, right? So if I look back at what I'm getting, now I'm getting the list again, right? So to me, just going back to this, I don't know. I don't see that I'm not gaining anything with this one in this particular case. So I probably want to use this one still. You gotta, it's not a one size fits all, right? We don't just use jQuery because it's better. We use jQuery for certain things. Like I said, sometimes I want to use JavaScript because it's easier, quicker. Other times I want to use jQuery because it's easier, quicker. Hey, am I going to use JavaScript for JSON, getting JSON information, or Ajax? Hell no. I'm going to use jQuery because it's better, it's easier, and it's cleaner. So when I look at my code, I know what I'm doing, right? I want to leave you with that one. Just to complete this one, if you notice, there's a few more pages about the XHR object and the generic Ajax call method, right? And how, if you really wanted to, you can go through and get things like JSON-P, and a bunch of other things that we haven't talked about, you probably don't need for this course, right? But if you really wanted to, I want you to state that there's other methods that we haven't talked about in terms of how you can access Ajax. And that's it for me for this week. Next week when we get together, just a note, right? And I'm going to just upload this to GitHub for you guys, updated project. We're going to handle a brand new library that I want you, if you want to take a look at it in advance so you can see how it works. But we're actually going to do some real animation and some real effects. And we're going to learn TypeScript for the very first time next week. So there's a couple things I want you to look at to prepare yourself, because we only have one day to get together next week, right? One is TypeScriptLang.org. TypeScriptLang.org. We've already been here for our little playground. Remember when we do this little code and we get what it looks like in JavaScript? We've done this before, right? So we're going to use TypeScript for the very first time next week. And the other thing that we're going to handle next week is Create.js. We're going to use Create.js, and one of your next assignment is going to be, we're going to use the Create.js library, which is a JavaScript library, to make a banner ad for your mini portfolio site, right? In order for us to do that, we're going to use something called an element that you might have not used yet called HTML Canvas, the Canvas element, and we're going to do advanced effects with it in order for us to create a banner ad, right? That's going to be your final assignment for this course. Okay, so please study, take a look at Create.js if you have time. Easel.js is the main thing we're going to use here. It comes with 4 different libraries, including a preloader, right? And we're going to do all that starting next week. Yes, any questions? Okay, I'll come back to you. Let me just stop recording. Thanks, guys.